Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, we just concluded the second round of the NFL draft. And I said, you know what? I got some takes. I got some thoughts. I'm not going to go player by player, going to hit on some of the picks I liked, some of the big picture things that we saw. And yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the more famous players typically go in the top 50, 60 picks. So the rest of the draft aren't always household names. But I do think philosophically, and the way some of these head coaches and GMs view what they value was on full display. And also some character stuff that was kind of eye-opening with one pick that made me shake my head. Got to touch on the David Tepper video that went viral on Friday of him going into the restaurant. And I think kind of what it represents. Seen a lot of different takes flying around. I don't think it's that complicated. So before we dive in, a bunch of content was on with Colin. I did a video earlier today that's up right now on the end of the first round because we got off at like pick 24 on the Bills trade, on what the 49ers did, Kansas City, obviously trading with the Bills to get Xavier Worthy. And then I had to touch on the Atlanta Falcons because it's going to be one of the biggest topics going into the offseason, let alone training camp, you know, selecting Michael Penix, which we're going to continue to talk about over the next week because every minute that goes by, I think of something new, have a new opinion on that. But before we dive into some overall thoughts on the second round, my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime, go to your smartphone right now. Go to your iPad, wherever you download your apps, download the Gametime app. You want to go to a game. I had the NBA playoffs on my second TV in Milwaukee. Fantastic game. Highly recommend. Actually, the game was in Indianapolis. But if you want to buy a pair of tickets, NBA game, NHL game, baseball game, concerts, comedy shows, download the Gametime app. Promo code JOHN, JOHN. Save $20 at purchase. Promo code JOHN. Save $20 Gametime. The second round. Let's just start with how it started. The Bills took a lot of shit last night. And I kind of agreed, not that they should have taken Xavier Worthy, though Xavier Worthy works with powerful arm quarterbacks. The Bills have one of those. So if the Chiefs like you, they're a cold weather team, you should like that player. Kind of, they know what they're doing. But I wouldn't have traded with them. Understand it. If they weren't going to take the guy, they move back. The Chiefs were going to take him anyway, get the picks. Then they trade out of 32 and go to 33. I love their pick. Keon Coleman, I'm very close with Derek Ray, who is the general manager of Florida State. And he was telling me last year, well before the season, like, you don't understand how good this guy is. And then immediately he scores 3 touchdowns in their first game against LSU. The knock on him is speed, but that's kind of the knock on Rome Odunze as well. Ball skills elite, physicality elite, size. I just think the guy's a really, really good player. I like that pick a lot. Gives you some identity, some toughness. Now, like, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. There's no way around it. He's not essentially like their number one wide receiver right away. But anytime you draft a guy high, you get rid of your number one wide receiver. I would say anything less than, 65 catches immediately is kind of a problem. Here's the good thing. They got some tight ends, they have a good running back, and they have a superstar quarterback. So if you're a wide receiver, where do you want to go? Not where Malik Neighbors went, and he's running wide open and no one can throw him the ball. It's the one position, it doesn't matter how good you are. Larry Fitzgerald's one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen. For half of his career, he played with nobodies. It's hard to function. So he gets to go to a place with a superstar in his prime. It doesn't get any better. It really doesn't. So it worked out pretty well for him. I think he's an impact player. I think he's going to be, I don't know, like all pro level, but I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. I think his skills translate. Now, getting open consistently, part of on the offensive coordinator. scheme him open, Josh Allen, throw the 50-50 balls, and let this dude go make plays, especially down in the red zone. You know, Jim Harbaugh said it perfectly. That's why I kept beating the drum. They're not taking a wide receiver. They're not taking a wide receiver. And then what did Jim Harbaugh say on Thursday night? We view the offensive line as weapons, but they do need wide receivers. And he took Ladd McConkey, who is, to me, immediately their slot receiver, who's a really good player, and who's going to be good. Jim Harbaugh would much rather have what he views as the best offensive lineman in the draft and a wide receiver in the second round than it flipped around. A top wide receiver at pick 5 and then the 8th best offensive lineman. If you haven't followed Jim Harbaugh's career, like, this is it. He is not dependent on Randy Moss and Calvin Johnson. He has won for a decade and a half now without those type guys. When you look back at his 49ers teams, like, if you just want to look at the NFL, they did not have very good. Their best receiver by a mile was Crabtree, and 1 year he tore his Achilles. They had like a 38-year-old Randy Moss. They drafted some wide receivers that couldn't play, and he ran the ball. He threw the ball to the tight end, and he played defense. That's what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. He just won the national title, dominated the season. How many of his wide receivers have gone in the top 65 picks? I've seen a bunch of Michigan guys fly off the board. That's not how he builds his team. So he likes guys like Ladd McConkey. He's not Andy Reid. That's not how he views football. So the least shocking thing of all is that he didn't take a wide receiver high. Now, it doesn't mean you still don't need them on your team. They value them. They get a guy from Georgia who's just really good. So I like the pick. The Patriots. I was on with the Fantasy Pros guys when they drafted Polk from Washington. And my guy Thor, who's come on this podcast before and who's like their draft analyst, had a really good point. This guy wasn't even the second best wide receiver on his own team. Obviously, Rome Odunze was their number 1. And when McMillan was healthy, he was their number 2 guy. This is their 3rd best wide receiver. So you come out of the draft with Drake Maye, who I like a lot, though I don't like him on the Patriots because their team's awful. He's a developmental guy, and their coaching staff, to me, is more than a question mark. And then you get a guy that a lot of people didn't even have as a top 10 wide receiver. And again, wasn't a top 3 wide receiver on his own team. So I don't know, man. Elliott Wolf came up in the Packer organization. His father's obviously Ron. Height, weight, speed. This guy's not really a burner. He's not that big. I don't know. I don't like anything about the Patriots. I like Drake Maye in theory, but I'm betting against that operation. There is not a team. Like, I'm betting against the Jets, but there is a scenario where the Jets are good. I see no scenario where the Pats have any shot. Any. And it's already ugly. The Titans. This one was a head scratcher. Like their first round pick. They take Latham. I think they would have taken Neighbors, but obviously he goes off the board at 6. You get a physical offensive lineman, which they were in desperate need of. They have Callahan as the head coach, and his dad is their offensive line coach, and he's one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. Here's the thing that doesn't make that much sense, though. You take Devontae Sweat, who is a beast. He's like 6'5", 700 pounds. I mean, he is an enormous human. You are not going to be able to run the ball at him. No problem with the player. He got a DUI less than a month ago. Sunday in the middle of the day. His character write-up talking to teams is a little bit of a question mark. So to draft a guy who just got a Dewey, who's off the field, is a little bit of a question mark at just where he was supposed to go in a place that I've been in Nashville twice for a total of probably close to 2 weeks, maybe 11, 12 days. I was drunk every day. It is one of the major party cities in America. So you get a guy that likes to party, who it's not like he fell in the draft. You're like, well, it's value. We couldn't pass him up. You took him right where he was going to go. I don't get that one. To me, that's pretty fucking risky. It really is. It's one thing, and I'm all for taking guys that have some off-the-field issues when they fall. That's called value. But to overpay, because that's what you're doing for a guy that has question marks at his where he was supposed to go, or maybe even a little higher, to me is pretty crazy, especially for a first-time head coach. The other thing is, if you are going to take some character risks, The Mike Tomlins, the Pete Carrolls, the Andys. I'm like, okay, those guys have seen a thing or two. They've been around the block. The Harbaugh brothers, been coaching a long time. Got a lot of gray hairs on their head. First-time head coach? That to me is borderline nuts. That to me is inviting a problem into your building. When you're trying to set the tone, kind of start from scratch, I don't get that one. Not opposed to the player, but I don't like the risk there. Everything in life is risk versus reward. And I don't see it here. I really don't, because he's not a pass rusher. He's a run stuffer. So I don't know, man. I don't get it. The 82-game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, John, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Howie, who just is having a really good draft, obviously takes the top corner on the board yesterday. He benefited from all the offensive players going. And then he gets Cooper DeJean, the white corner. I mean, I don't think there's been a white corner since Jason Sehorn, who is an elite athlete and who has return value. He can play outside. He can play the slot. The Eagles are desperate for a good nickel corner. It was their downfall last year. Obviously, and he can play outside as well, but Bradbury's done. I know he's technically still on the team. He's not going to be. He cannot play anymore. Slay is pretty risky because he's getting up there in age and he's having knee problems. Though when he's been healthy, he's been solid. They're going to be, the kid from Toledo, Mitchell, immediate starter. And I think this guy has a chance to immediately start at nickel. Here's the other thing. This guy was a dynamic return man as well. This new kickoff return setup brings into play guys like this, because you're not going to put Saquon back there. Their two wide receivers aren't really players like that, right? Like if you think about some wide receivers that could do it, like Deebo Samuel could 100%, and he will, I'm sure, be a kickoff return guy. I think DeJean immediately becomes like this modern day kickoff return. You put him in that spot, or at least can try it out. So he brings value at multiple spots, versatile player. That's a big thing that the Eagles are big on, versatility. Now, their success on defense, obviously their corner play needs to improve, but it's going to come down to the D lineman. They drafted Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter really, really high. And Jalen had flashes last year of just elite play. They're going to need the guy to be a Pro Bowler and ideally become like an All-Pro. It hinges on him. And then Jordan Davis just has to be solid. If those guys are good, we know they got enough edge rushers, the corners will look a lot better, especially these young corners. Because every team you play now in the NFL, who's the team they play first week one in Brazil? The Packers. What do they have? About 8 million young wide receivers. A couple of them can fly. So they're going to need that defensive line to step up. A lot's going to be talked about the corners and how that's why Howie's drafting these guys. But to me, their success of turning around this thing, obviously you add Vic Fangio, the D lineman. You invest in 2 top 15 picks. Jordan Davis has battled with weight issues. I got news for you. Big, kind of chubby, fat guys in the NFL deal with weight issues. It's hard. It is difficult. It's going to be an issue for Sweat with the Titans. When you weigh 340, 350 pounds, conditioning is an issue. It's hard. Big people struggle with their weight. Welcome to society. It's happened forever with centers in the NBA. It's no different than certain defensive tackles or offensive linemen. It's hard because you're naturally eating a lot to just maintain your weight. So that's something they got to stay on that guy, and they just got to stay on Jalen to stay on the straight and narrow focused and kick ass and take names. One thing I always respect about offensive coaches is when they value defense. It's one thing I've said about Kyle Shanahan for a long time. He values physicality and defense. He will invest his resources on that side of the ball. Well, Sean McVay loses Aaron Donald, who, I don't know, besides like Marshall Faulk, is one of the greatest players in the history of the franchise. There is no replacing that. There's nothing you can do when like Tom Brady retires or Aaron Donald retires. right? Or if Travis Kelce retires, I'm not saying he's retiring, or Jason Kelsey's a better example. Like, you can't replace him. There's going to be a drop off, right? But you do need to attempt with multiple bodies. What did they do last night? Verse, power rusher, edge guy. What do they do today? Defensive tackle, Florida State. So they've doubled down on the defensive line position after losing Aaron Donald. One thing we don't talk enough about with Aaron Donald is the versatility he had, especially in his younger years. You could kind of move him around. You light him up over the center. I've seen him countless times against the 49ers, line him up over the tackle. He had some J.J. Watt characteristics there. So you keep doubling down on this position. And if they hit on these guys, the Rams are going to be good. I mean, we saw how good they were playing at the end of the year. If Stafford is healthy, I mean, this is a team I think that compete in the NFC to win the entire thing. I'm not saying the Super Bowl beat the Chiefs. I'm just saying to compete with the 49ers, the Lions, the Packers, to win the NFC. Hell, they went toe-to-toe with the Lions on the road this year. So really like just the way the Rams think about football. Because it'd be easy to like offense, sexy offense. It's what a lot of coaches do. They like calling plays. It's Lincoln Riley's downfall. He's just obsessed with offense. It's kind of just the way he coaches. Say this for Sean McVay. His teams are tough. And he just added 2 tough physical guys at the point of attack. Because it's the one place in football that is still somewhat played like 1970s and 80s. It is a violent game there. And he's added 2 violent players. The Colts. There was a lot of talk last night if they would take a wide receiver. They ended up going with Latu. I watched some of Chris Ballard's press conference. He said Latu was their number 1 defensive player on the board. And he's excellent. I mean, he's the best pure pass rusher in this draft for sure. The only question is the neck. And then they got a guy that, fell in the draft in Mitchell from Texas, who is a freak athlete. And he's big. He's 6'2". He ran a 4.35. He vertical jumped almost 40 inches. He had 11 touchdowns this year. I mean, this guy is a very, very talented player. Rap Sheet said after they drafted him, the reason he was there, I think pick 44, 45, his visits have been an abomination. Rap Sheet said some of his visits, he wasn't even paying attention or listening and seemed disinterested, which is weird. And I get it, young, immature, we've all been there. But you would think on a job interview, especially with head coaches and coordinators, even if you're not the most focused guy, you'd fake it. You'd kind of, when I worked with the Eagles, we'd call them a con, but you'd at least try. And there's a reason a guy with this talent playing at that program, I mean, hell, his teammate got a fucking DUI 15, 20 days ago and got drafted ahead of him. He weighs 370 pounds. You get a guy that's 6'2", runs a 4.35, was that productive? Gets at that position, gets drafted after him. It tells you, these visits, the NFL is a lot like high school. Rumors just fly. Everyone knows each other. Everyone talks. The negativity can snowball down a hill like an avalanche. And what's weird about the Colts, they value character a lot. I mean, they don't mess around with weird dudes, right? Think about the core of their team. Who have they traded for a couple years? Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, DeForest Buckner's like a man of the year type. Michael Pittman, I think he was married either in college or right when he got out of college. Very serious cat. Even Anthony Richardson's people love the character. Quentin Nelson, Chris Ballard has not been fishing at the pier of these character guys. And this is a little bit off the beaten path. But here's the thing. I had a radio show a long time ago now. And we interviewed Moose Johnson. And he said something that I'll never forget. He said, and he played on those great Cowboys teams that won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. He said to build a great team, and most of the great teams in the history of the league have had this. You need a team. How do you say it? I'm going to screw it up now. You need a team full of character. I'm blanking out now. I got so many names running through me. But basically, of you need the majority of your guys to be high. That was a complete butcher job on my fault. My bad. My bad. I set that up very, very poorly. But basically, you're inevitably going to get some character guys. And your character guys are going to have to play well. And when you hit on the character guys that play well, you're in good shape. When your character guys aren't playing as well, you got a major problem. And think about some of those Cowboys teams. They had some wild childs. they were Hall of Famers. So this is the first time he's kind of gone out. God, I butchered that. I should have wrote it down before I hopped on. We got a lot going on. But this is a little shocked, not gonna lie. Other than that, Chiefs took a project at offensive tackle, really talented guy from BYU. Ravens took the other tackle from Washington, like that guy. Niners took a corner from Florida State, little undersized, but good athlete, played well against LSU. It's hard. You know, the hard part about, especially once we get in the third and fourth round, and I've gone to camps for so many years, is that you get so excited for all the draft picks, and then all of a sudden, like, undrafted free agents will be making more plays than them. So it's the hard part about the draft. It's hard not to get excited when guys are picked, but we know with every round that happens, the percentage chance goes lower and lower in terms of, the chances of these guys becoming impact players, hell, starters, hell, making the team. eBay Motors is here for the ride. You know, the first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back, and you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit, because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that third row of seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. I want to end on this really quick. The Tepper video is going viral of the local restaurant putting a sign out in front that said, basically, let the GM and coach pick the players, which essentially shot at David Tepper. Like, stay out of the way. So stop getting so involved. He walked in, which looked like his right-hand man, and talked to the people at the front desk that I assumed one of the guys owns the restaurant. And he took the guy's hat off, and they had him on the camera, essentially saying, like, did you guys put that out there? And everyone's, making fun of him and talking shit about him. Like, bro, you're a clown. Here's the thing about David Tepper. For however many decades now, he has been insanely rich. People didn't talk shit about him, at least publicly, because if you did and you were in his industry, he would crush you. And that's what, tycoons do in business. There's no physical violence in business, right, at his level. There's just like, I'm going to take you out. I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to put you on the street. I'm going to make your kids beg me to give your father a job. It's the cutthroat nature of capitalism. I love elements of it. And at the highest level in which Tepper's at, he destroys people in his way. People aren't outspokenly at his level. Before he owned this team, he's not used to this. Here's the problem. Fans don't give a shit how much money you have or how successful you've been. They don't care. His ability to trade stocks and run hedge funds and do everything he can do to make all this money means nothing to them. All they want to do is turn on their television on Sunday and see a good team and see functional players. They've seen them before. They went to a Super Bowl 7-8 years ago. They've had an MVP. They've had a high-end Pro Bowl players at all sorts of positions. If you're like 35 years old as a Panther fan or 40 years old, you've seen a lot of good players. You know what good teams look like and you know what bad teams look like. And here's what you know. Since David Tepper has taken over, they've been a fucking disaster. The trade for Bryce Young, even if Caleb is a bust, is one of the worst trades of all time. Is one of the worst trades of all time. If Caleb is good, it is easily, you could argue, the worst trade of all time. He's gotten rid of Christian McCaffrey, who the 49ers just went to overtime in the Super Bowl. He's arguably their best player. I mean, he just gets rid of, he doesn't feel like he knows what he's doing. And it'd be one thing. It's like, well, he hired the wrong guys. There are all these articles coming out and everyone's confirming it that he's the one doing it. So it's like, hey, Dave, we know you're super successful and you're used to destroying people in your way, which is what big time business people do. But no one cares about that anymore. Just stay out of the fucking way and let people you hire attempt to build a football team. You need to stop telling your offensive coordinator what plays he should run. So I think he's all thrown up. He's never had this happen to him, at least for a long, long time. But this is justified because the fans don't care how many billions you have in your pocket. They just want a team that can compete to win the goddamn division. And I think he's really thrown off. He's really rattled and he's not handling it well. And I think the NFL, there was the visual last year of him throwing the cocktail or the water or whatever he was drinking all over the guy's face. And then you have this in the restaurant. The media might tell you Rodgers is an idiot. Rodgers running the biggest league in America by a country mile, running circles around everyone. Last night, the NBA had two of the marquee franchises, the Knicks and the Lakers, on, and not a soul watched them. Rodgers is dominating right now. And I promise you this, Rodgers can't be happy. Here's the other thing. Rodgers technically not the boss. The owners are. It's kind of embarrassing for the other owners. What do they talk about a lot in football? The shield, the shield, the shield. The brand, the brand, the brand. The league, the league, the league. And this guy is in a league full of other rich guys. Everyone talks shit about owners. Welcome to the business. This is part of the deal. You got to take it. You can talk shit, behind closed doors, but you can't be doing this. You are currently an embarrassment to our operation. It was thriving before you got here, and if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice. Someone has to be if I was Roger, I'd fine him. And finding him money doesn't do anything. I'd take away next year's second round pick. This is not okay. You can't act like this to the consumer. The reason the NFL has lapped everybody is because of us, you and me, because we watch at a large, large quantity. Last night shattered records for the NFL draft in terms of ratings and the amount of people that watched. Hundreds of thousands of people showed up to Cold Detroit. That is the base of the league. That is where the money comes from. And he's treating these people on camera awful. It just can't fly. And to me, there's no fine him $5 million. That's like me handing over a 20. You got to hit him where it's hurt. Hit him where it hurts. And that's the team. I don't know what you do, but finding him money is not doing anything to this guy because he's embarrassing the league. I understand why he's acting like this. He's not used to it, but it's an awful look and someone has to get control. But here's the problem. Who in his life can be like, I don't know if you should do that. That's not a good idea. There's not a soul. The only people, the other owners and Raj. But man, if I was a Panther fan, keep talking that what, because this guy, I had a lot of respect for him as just, a little stock trader, made a little money, lost a little money. This guy, that was before he owned the team. This has been a clown show. And we've seen a lot of owners get made fun of at really, really high levels. Hell, when I was around the Bay Area a lot, we destroyed Jed York when he fired Harbaugh. Mark Davis got crushed for years. It's part of the business you're in, man. It's what happens when you lose and do dumb things. When you win, everyone loves you. It's very fickle. And right now, your team was unwatchable last year. I mean, your team was so bad. It was unwatchable. I can watch any football game. When the Panthers were on, I would change the channel or flip it to another game. They were that bad. And anyone listening, if you're a fan of the NFC South or a Panther fan, you know I'm right. And it starts with this guy. I've known coaches that have been part of his operation. It's insanity what's going on there. So these fans aren't just making this up. Like this isn't just pulled out of their you know what. Like this is justified. And he's handling it like a 10-year-old. When he's 60 years old, because he's not used to being told this. This is why owning a team, while it's very glamorous and very profitable, if you have thin skin, man, it's going to be a long, long career if your team sucks.